Hey friends, welcome back to the Happy Homestead. I'm Amanda, and today is an exciting day because it is a cheese making day. Yay! I always love cheese making days. It's a perfect activity to learn and to do a day you're at home. Maybe it's dreary and drizzly outside like today, and it's just a day where you can enjoy the process. And it is a process. Now, if you're new to the channel, please click above or click below. I'll have some links. I have an entire playlist on cheese making, where to begin, how to begin, what recipes to start with, what book to start with. And that is how this playlist has gotten created. I have gone through Ricky Carroll's home cheese making book, working my way through this book myself and with you. And so today we're making a Gouda cheese. This is on page 206 of this book. I have made this cheese once, if not twice before, and Marley's playing, so you might hear something. One of my favorite ways to make this recipe is with goat's milk. I am not using goat's milk today. I only have cow's milk. Still gonna be delicious, but goat milk Gouda is also pretty phenomenal. Okay, so with this recipe, not hard. It follows the same similar steps and process that we've gone through in our past cheese making videos. I'm using 2 gallons milk today, a half teaspoon of calcium chloride diluted in half a cup of water. Remember, when we're diluting our things in water, we're using non-chlorinated filtered water, spring water, not tap water. 1 packet of mesophilic starter culture, half teaspoon rennet diluted in a 1/4 cup of non-chlorinated water. And then once we get our cheese kind of in the press and it's formed, we're actually gonna soak it in what's called a saturated brine for I think 8 hours. And I don't have a saturated brine made, and I should back up a minute. What is a saturated brine? It's really just salt water, a really high density ratio of salt to water. And then you soak your cheese in it, and it just helps remove any extra moisture, right? Any more of that whey that could be in it. But we got to make our brine, and then once you make it, I usually keep it in the refrigerator for about a year. It lasts a long time. I threw away the brine I had made for last year, so we need to start a new one for 2023. And so then we'll form our cheese, soak it in the brine, let it dry, and then let it age. Process steps, yes, but I promise you, once you kind of watch a couple of these videos and start doing this yourself, you realize that every step is kind of the same in the process, and it's a fun activity to do. So the first step is we're gonna get our milk in our pot. I have my large stock pot on the stove here, and we're gonna heat the milk up to 90 degrees and then add our calcium chloride / filtered water mixture. So remember, their milk is in the refrigerator. It's around 45 degrees, right? We're bringing it up to 90. I think I mentioned this in one of my other cheese videos, but when I first started cheese making, I thought, oh my gosh, it's gonna take forever to get to 90 degrees. I just wasn't really thinking of the differential, right? As where it is and where it needed to go. And so I would turn my burner on high and maybe I'd stir it, but most likely I was just kind of like stirring, walking away for periods of time, coming back, and then lo and behold, I was over temperature. So don't make that mistake. It doesn't take long to get up to whatever the temperature is you need. And usually within cheese making, it's anywhere between 80 to maybe 110, right? Depending upon the cheese, but you're not going super high. The only one you do go super high on is when you're making ricotta, and you're really kind of staying by for that as well. But I say that because I want you to know I have it on medium heat, literally straight down on medium on a 5 on my stove. I will stir it periodically over the next 10 minutes or so, but it's not going to take long. While it is heating, we're gonna go ahead and mix up our calcium chloride solution and our rennet solution. So calcium chloride is what we're going to add first, right? Once we get it to 90 degrees, we're gonna add this in. And I am using, I didn't even mention either, I'm using whole milk. I always use whole milk unless a recipe specifically states otherwise. So I have half a cup of cold non-chlorinated water here. I'm going to add half a teaspoon of calcium chloride and just stir that around. So in this little cup here, I have a quarter cup of cold non-chlorinated water, and we're gonna add a half teaspoon again, but this time we are doing rennet. And I have just enough. I'm gonna add that in. The rennet is what we add at the appropriate time to actually coagulate the milk and get it into the curd form. So it's important to note that I get a lot of my cheese making supplies from New England Cheesemaking Company. And I do have a coupon code down below where you can get 5% off of your order. That is where I get my calcium chloride, the rennet, and then my starters, my cultures rather. So this is a packet of mesophilic culture. And what's great about this book is Ricky Carroll, by the way, is involved within New England Cheesemaking Company. So the book and the company kind of go hand in hand. But what's really nice is that the book is written for, you know, 1 packet mesophilic or half a packet of thermophilic, right? And so it's sold in these easily measured out portions so you don't have to think about it. So I'm using a slotted spoon when I do my cheese making and stirring. It just really helps to kind of distribute the cream, the natural cream along the milk, right? If you are using homogenized milk, then that's probably something you not need to worry about. But if your milk is not homogenized, right, which basically means cream top, then you want to make sure as you're stirring, you're going back and forth, you're also going top to bottom with that slotted spoon to help really distribute the cream throughout. Because let's face it, the cream is the best part, and that's what makes your cheese creamy. Okay, we've made it to 90 degrees. I'm going to move the pan just off the burner a bit. And the reason is because I don't need it going too much higher, right? With the thermal mass of the milk, it may go up a couple of degrees, but by taking it off the burner, you help mitigate that a little bit. I'm gonna add in my calcium chloride water solution. Thoroughly mix that around, again, back and forth as well as up and down. And once you feel that is mixed well, it doesn't take long. So set my spoon aside. I am going to sprinkle my 1 packet of mesophilic starter over the top. I just cut the top open, and you're letting it just sprinkle and sit on the top. This is a freeze-dried culture. So it takes just a couple of minutes to let it rehydrate on the surface of the milk. So again, letting this sit for about 2 minutes. 2 minutes is up. Now again, we are going to thoroughly stir that powdered culture back in. It should be rehydrated right now. The culture is what actually gives your cheese a distinct flavor. If you think about the different types of cheeses in the world and the different flavors that they can embody, right? It's really all about the culture. Is it mesophilic? Is it thermophilic? And that's just 2 of many types of cultures. There are others. And then it also depends on how long is it aging, how much of the whey is brought out, right? If it's a dry cheese, that means more of the whey has been expressed. Okay, thoroughly mixed. I am going to put my lid on and start my timer for 30 minutes. And we're gonna let this sit for 30 minutes undisturbed. So while it's on the stove for 30 minutes, this is a really good time to use my favorite burner again with a different pot and get my saturated brine going. The recipe for saturated brine in the book is on page 46, and it calls for a gallon of non-chlorinated water, 2 1/4 cups salt. It says cheese salt. Now, cheese salt is really just salt that has not been iodized. If you follow along the channel, you know I really like and prefer Redmond real salt, which is also not iodized. So I will be using Redmond real salt today. And then it calls for calcium chloride and vinegar. I am having the recipe. And the only reason I'm doing this is because I just know from previous experience last year, even with all the cheese making I did, 1 gallon of brine would have been too much, especially too much to store in my refrigerator. So I already filled a 1/2 gallon mason jar with my non-chlorinated water. I measured out 1 1/8, which comes out to 18 ounces of salt, 1/8 pound, 18 ounces of my Redmond real salt. I've got my calcium chloride and vinegar here. I got my pot. We're just gonna get everything in the pot, put it on the burner, bring it to a boil because we really want to dissolve that salt, let it cool, and then our brine is ready. So I'm first gonna pour my water in. My salt. And the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon calcium chloride, right, for a full recipe. So I am halving it, 1/2 of a tablespoon calcium chloride. And then it calls for 1 teaspoon vinegar, but again, halving it. So 1/2 teaspoon vinegar. Okay, get this on the stove and bring it to a boil. Guys, our 30 minutes is up. We are now gonna add our rennet. I'm just gonna check the temperature. I want you to see. So we're at 87.8, around 88 degrees. So the thermal mass does keep the milk at around 90, right? Don't be worried if it dips down a couple of degrees. All right, remember we had our rennet in our 1/4 cup of cool non-chlorinated water. We're gonna add that in. And just like before, stir back and forth as well as up and down. If you are using cream line or cream top milk, it is really important that you stir again in all directions, and probably even for an extra minute otherwise if you were using homogenized. And the reason is because the cream has risen a little bit, right, over that last 30-minute time period. And so you want to make sure it's all incorporated. Put the lid back on. Timer set for 45 minutes. So my saturated brine came to a boil. This all happened prior to us just adding the rennet. I took it off the stove. I'm going to show you this in a minute, but it's really hot. So I just have it cooling here on the counter on a hot plate. We really want to get that brine down to cold temperature before we put our cheese in it. I guess we're going to be putting our cheese in it tomorrow. So it's a good idea to have your brine all done and cooled at least 24 hours before you need to use it. So you'll see it's kind of got that pinky color, and that's just because I used the Redmond real salt. And there is still some salt on the bottom of the pan, but for the most part, it is all dissolved. So we're just gonna let this cool. The timer is gonna go off in 2 minutes, and we're gonna cut the curds. I just wanted to let you know though, over the last 45 minutes, my saturated brine cooled enough that I put it back in that 1/2 gallon mason jar and in the refrigerator. Again, we're gonna use that tomorrow. It will be fully cooled by then, but I'm glad that's done. Now when I cut my curds, I use an offset spatula. The longer, the better, depending on how deep your pot is, right, and how many gallons of milk you're using. But I'm gonna cut into a grid format and then try to go horizontally to cut into 1/2-inch cubes throughout the entire pot. We'll let the curds set for about 10, there we go, sit for about 10 minutes, and then you'll see more whey come up to the top, and we'll drain a third of the whey off, and then we're gonna start reheating the curds and getting more whey out. And you'll know that your curds are ready to be cut because when you put your spatula in on the edge, you should see the curds pull away from the pan. Can you see that? Literally pulling away. So that's how you know. Okay, so I've got my grid pattern this way, but if you think about it, I don't actually have cubes yet, I have columns. So we need to go in horizontally. Do not stretch out, do not stress out and try to get everything perfect. All we're doing is cutting the curds so that we can release more of that whey. We're gonna let this sit for 10 minutes. Okay, the timer went off. I've got the pot right here next to me. I'll show you that in a sec. I also went and filled my tea kettle because we're gonna pour off a third of the whey, and then we're gonna bring the temperature back up to about 92 degrees. And you want to do that by slowly adding hot water. Now it says 175 degree water, right? So it's not boiling water, but hot water. And the hot water added to the curds here, again, it helps just to release more whey. When you have a curd, the more wet a curd is, the more wet, dare I say the word I hate, but moist cheese is. Whereas if you express as much of the whey out of the curd, you have a more drier cheese. The teapot is on the stove with water heating up. I'm at 81 degrees. So we are gonna be bringing it up about 11 degrees. So I'm gonna slowly pour off some of my whey. Okay, I'm happy with that. So this is what I'll jar up. It's maybe about a quart. We're gonna get this back over on the stove. So while my teapot is heating up, I'm just gonna keep this stirred. You don't want your curds to mat together. Now, ideally, I already would have had my water heating up, but I wasn't paying attention and I didn't do that. It's okay, just keep your curds stirred so they don't become one mass. Okay, my water is at 155 degrees, so I'm just gonna start adding some in. It only took about 4-5 minutes max, and just start stirring. The goal is to bring the temperature of the curds in the whey up to 92 degrees. So I moved it off the burner because it's at 93. I'm just gonna stir everything around. I'm gonna leave it sit for 10 more minutes and then we'll drain off more of the whey. All right, our 10 minutes is almost up. I'm going to drain off the whey again and bring it just to the line of the curd line. Okay, so you can see the line of the curds there. We want to bring this up to 100 degrees and not have a mass of curds. We are at, gosh, it looks like we're actually at 98, so it increased a little bit. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of hot water. Once we get this to 100 degrees, we want to keep it there for 15 minutes, and we are at 102. So I'm gonna set my timer for 15 minutes, and I'm just gonna stir every few minutes to keep the curds moving. We don't want them to come together, because when they come together in a mass, in a ball like that, then it's harder for them to express more of that whey. So by keeping them stirred, keeping them moving within the 100-degree water, they're able to express more of that whey out. So I'm gonna stir every few minutes and keep it at 100 degrees for 15 minutes. All right, it's 15 minutes is up.
I maintained the 100-degree temperature as best as I could. I did have to add some more of my hot water over that 15 minutes to keep it around 100. But you can see the curds are not matted together. They're pretty loose and stirring around easily. And there's a couple big curds. But what we're gonna do now is just let this sit for 30 minutes. Undisturbed, not worry about the temperature, and then in 30 minutes we're going to drain off as much of the whey as we can and put our curds in our cheese mold. Our 30 minutes is almost up. Once it is, I'm going to bring the pot over here to the sink. I've got my cheese mold just kind of in the sink here, so that way everything drains out down the drain. I've got a clean piece of cheesecloth lining my mold, and I'm going to very carefully scoop my cheese curds and put them in here. You don't want to break them up too much. In some recipes it tells you to do that, but in this one we're going to try to keep them as intact within our scoops as we can. Once it's full, I'll put it on the cheese press, and then we're going to press at 20 pounds pressure for 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, I'm going to take it out of the press, rewrap it with another piece of clean cheesecloth. We're going to flip it as we rewrap it, and then we're going to press at 40 pounds pressure for 20 minutes. "20 minutes is up. We're going to flip, rewrap, and then press it at about 50 pounds pressure overnight. I'm gonna let this go. It says anywhere, I think, up to 16 hours. So I'm literally gonna let this go all overnight. And then tomorrow we'll take it out and put it in our brine. Good morning. It is next morning. This has been in the press for 18 hours. And so it is ready to come out. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna actually sprinkle the top with salt. All right, so I'm just sprinkling salt on the top. And again, I will flip it in 4 hours. You always wanna sprinkle the exposed side with salt. Our cheese is done in the brine. I'm gonna take it out. Looks great. Looks really good. So I am going to leave it out. What we have to do now is let it air dry. The recipe says up to 3 weeks. I don't know that I'm gonna let it go a full 3 weeks, but the goal is to let it just sit and dry out as much as possible. I'm gonna flip it probably twice a day, morning and night. And then over time, I'm gonna see some liquid accumulate, it's basically whey, accumulate in this plate down here. But basically we're gonna let this go for, I'm gonna say about a week, flipping it twice a day, getting it really dry and kind of creating a natural rind. I'll show you the process as we go. And then once I feel it's pretty good with a natural rind, then we'll go ahead and vacuum seal it. So you wanna keep this in a place where it is going to be undisturbed.
These kind of picnic covers, these collapsible picnic covers, I think are really handy just to kind of keep anything off of the cheese, but still let it air dry as necessary. So I'm going to put this in my pantry. You want to put it somewhere cool. You could do it in the refrigerator as well if you have room, but the whole point is to make sure that it is undisturbed. You're flipping it twice a day to keep it dry. And don't forget to save your brine. It has been 3 days since we took our cheese out of the brine, and then we've been drying it, right? The recipe said 3 weeks, but honestly, mine is really dry, and I'm gonna vacuum seal it up today. So look how beautiful it is. No moisture. There's already a natural rind forming. The recipe had said 3 weeks. I'm not gonna go 3 weeks. I will tell you, I had it in the refrigerator. I just turned it morning and night, but I kept the whole thing with this on in the refrigerator just to really keep it at that good temperature. I'm gonna vacuum seal this and put it in the cheese cave. Now, before you start saying, oh, well, I don't have a cheese cave, just put it in your fridge. Vacuum seal it and put it in the refrigerator. The reason I vacuum seal is it just creates its own perfect environment, right, for aging. It doesn't dry out. It's not going to absorb any other odors that's in your refrigerator. It's not going to absorb any other moisture, right? By vacuum sealing it, it's keeping it in its own perfect humid environment for the proper aging. So I'm going to vacuum seal it and put it in the fridge. And just as important to label your cheese here, remember I have a journal where I write down and keep track of all of the cheeses I've made, what date I made them, what recipe did I follow, how many gallons of milk did I use, how many days did I let it dry, right? Then when did I vacuum seal it? And that way I know how long I need to age it, right? And when it's ready to be opened. Now, this Gouda is ready within anywhere 3 to 6 months. 3 months is probably the minimum I would go. But for a really delicious Gouda, like a little extra flavoring and culture, like the culture deepening, 6 to 9 months. I'm gonna let this puppy go to 6 to 9 months and write everything down in my book. Thank you for joining me on the Gouda cheese making journey. I really look forward to coming back with another cheese next time. Stay healthy, stay well. Bye-bye.